Alright y'all, welcome back to the channel and to some more buckshot testing, and today we've got a really interesting combination to run. I'm definitely curious to see if it works out the way I think it has the potential to, or if today's shotgun and choke combo really kind of messes with the buckshot loading that we've got and doesn't let it actually give us what we know that we can get from them. It could legitimately go either way. It's just one of those combos that we're just going to have to try and see what happens. So first up, for the shells that we're running today, I've actually got two slightly different variations that we're going to put head to head, side by side, and see how they do in comparison to each other through our setup. But they are some more of the Federal Flite Control buckshot loads. Although today we've got a 2 3/4 inch 9 pellet double aught load and a 3-inch 12 pellet double aught load. Both of these are moving 1325. So 2 3/4 9 versus 3-inch 12. We'll see how these two stack up compared to each other. Is there going to be a massive difference between them? Are they both going to be hammers? Really don't know yet. We've done our fair share of testing with the 9 pellet, but I don't know that we've done very much, if any at all, with the 3-inch 12 pellet variant in the Flite Control lineup. So these should be two loadings that definitely can give us some very impressive looking patterns. But part of the big question mark comes in with our setup today, which is the Mossberg 835 Ulti-Mag. It's got a 28-inch barrel on it, and the choke we're going to be running is the Patternmaster Black Mamba. These are 690 constriction, and as a whole, this setup is rather interesting for a flight control loading. These 835s are overboard inside to a 10 gauge barrel spec, so a little more breathing room for them in the barrel. And this Black Mamba is kind of Patternmaster's little bit more do-all choke. You can run turkey, waterfowl, buckshot through it. It's generally shown very nice results with all of those. But you see these spirals on the outside of the choke? Those are also kind of sort of on the inside as well. It's supposed to allow gas to escape from around the wadding and stuff to help with the constriction of your pattern. So with it being an overboard barrel and a gas over constriction 690 choke at the end of a 10 gauge essentially barrel, little more choke on average than a 690 would be in a typical 12 gauge bore compared to bore diameter. So this should be rather interesting if this combination of shotgun and choke will work with these flight control wads and how well it'll actually do. Now I think we should have a very quick discussion on flight control wads, whether it's waterfowl, buckshot, defensive oriented loads, whatever. Most people have the general thought process that flight control wads are designed for cylinder or improved cylinder choke barrels. That's the only thing you can run, that's the best they'll do, and that's what you get. That's what they're made to do, and that's what you should do. And that's not entirely true. Yes, they are designed to perform well through very little to no choke constriction, but they are designed to perform better than the average other buckshot loads typically would when using those much more open choke constrictions. That does not mean that you cannot run them through tighter chokes and get fantastic results, which we have shown time and time again. Typically, these more hunting oriented flight control loads really do like a full choke. So I always get told the same thing in the comments, they would have done better in a cylinder bore, and that's not necessarily true. Would they do better in a cylinder bore in comparison to a Winchester Super X buckshot load? Yeah, absolutely. But that's not their sole intended purpose. So hopefully we covered that. And as far as our testing today, I've got two targets lined up side by side at 40 yards with the chrono and templates as well. So we'll take a shot with the 2 3/4 9 and the 3-inch 12 pellet load back to back, and we'll see what they really do in comparison to each other and how they both perform through the 835 with the Black Mamba choke. We'll start with the 9, then we'll go to the 12 pellet load and see how they do. Okay, so for the velocities we got out of those shells, both of them were claiming 1325. First up was the 2 3/4 9 pellet load. That one showed up as 1377 through the chrono. Not completely unusual to see a little bit extra velocity from a flight control load, depending on the barrel length and stuff like that. So mid 1300s, pretty reasonable. Not anything too out of the normal, although we are starting to get up there and move on out. But as far as the reading from our 3-inch 12 pellet load, that one showed 1480. I highly doubt that that was accurate. It could have potentially read the wad or something like that. I don't know that I've ever seen almost 1500 from a double aught buck load. So I would imagine, since both of them are claiming 1325, they're probably mid 1300s or so on average. But let's head down range and see how our patterns actually look. All right, so here we have our two 40-yard targets side by side. On the left, you have your 2 3/4 inch 9 pellet load. On the right, we have our 3-inch 12 pellet load. And there is definitely a winner here between these two shots. Obviously, this is just one shot with each load, so there may be variation between them. This isn't a perfectly scientific test, but there's definitely an obvious winner for sure. First, we'll start on the left with our 2 3/4 inch 9 pellet load. The white dots were the points of aim. This one, we kind of had a top and bottom split right above and below the dot. We had 6 up a little bit higher, which I think is the main area of our pattern, with 3 that definitely favored a little bit low. So don't love when we have splits like this. Sometimes 9 pellet loads can have a flyer. A lot of people call it the 9th pellet flyer, but we've clearly got 3 here, I'm thinking. Now I did measure. We're sitting at 19.5 inches tall by 13 1/4 inches wide, and that is from tallest point of our two pellets farthest apart and the widest two pellets apart. So from the very bottom up to this top center pellet, and then our two widest points are left to right here. This upper area of 6 pellets is right at 13 1/4 inches, but the rest is a little bit more splotchy. Typically, I say anything sub 20 inches total at 40 yards is a decent buckshot pattern, and technically we're there at 19.5 overall. But I also say anything sub 15 inches is really starting to get pretty impressive at 40 for a buckshot load. And the top half is there, but not quite the bottom half on this one. Comparing that now to what we had with the 3-inch 12 pellet load, this is obviously a much better pattern. The 9 pellet load tried with the top half of it, but this one actually kept all of our pellets where we want them to be at. I favored a little to the right. That was probably on me on that shot, but either way, we're looking at 11 inches tall by 13 inches wide, so pretty even spread of pellets there. Might have a little thin area to the right of the white dot, but nothing egregious. We are under the 15-inch spread mark no matter what way we measure it, so that is a very nice buckshot pattern for 40 yards. It's not an absolute baseball, but we don't have a waterfowl pattern either. I think that's going to be about the perfect kind of deer hunting pattern for a lot of people. So even though we ran him through a 690 choke in the Patternmaster Black Mamba, in the overboard 835 as well, you see we can still get perfectly good patterns from a flight control load at 40 yards. And I can tell you that pattern is better than a cylinder bore would be in that same gun for sure. So first up for templates, we have our deer cut out here, starting with the 2 3/4 inch 9 pellet load. If we put it where the white dot was, you can see the big split there. Not exactly what you want to see in our pattern, assuming we had our shot actually centered up. Would have still done the job with those pellets down there at the bottom, but not ideal. But just for the sake of doing it, if we were to move it up where I think the main portion of our pattern is, excluding the flyers down at the bottom, you got 6 of them all right through the vitals. So maybe a little luck of the draw. I don't love when we have a split like that. May need a little more testing to see if that trend continues or not with this combo and these shells. And now for the 3-inch 12 pellet load, since I definitely favored a little to the right on that shot and there was no split to contend with, I did favor the deer template just a little farther forward. And I mean, you can clearly see what would happen either which way. You've got all 12 pellets right through the vital zone on a deer. Very nice hunting pattern for 40 yards, no question about it. Maybe if somebody's running deer in thick cover, it might be a little bit too tight for up close shots, but I think a lot of people would not hesitate to run that combination, and it would certainly do the job. Next up, we have our Coyote template, back to the 2 3/4 9 pellet load, and once again, that split right across the middle is definitely messing with our pattern if we had a good centered up shot anyway. But if the upper 6 pellets was where our main pattern is, then clearly would be a bad day for a Coyote as well if we favored the template up there on the top half of the pattern. And now moving back over to our 3-inch 12 pellet load, obviously I'd say a much more consistently reliable result for predators. Now, is an 835 with a Black Mamba choke and a flight control double out load a common predator type of setup? Maybe, maybe not, but if you got one in the backyard, or if you're out deer hunting with that combo, and this is the setup you had a Coyote come through, then this is clearly my preferred option for sure. Bad day for any kind of predator that walks past that combination. And then finally, we have a torso cutout. We're not trying to say that this is a 40-yard self-defense type of combination or that you should even be taking that shot, but there's some people that'll be watching this that may not have as good of an idea on actual body sizes of animals. They may be more familiar with a typical torso cutout. This is 18 by 30, just like you'd usually find in any kind of regulation torso cutout. And for our 2 3/4 9 pellet load, you see we've got all of them on the target right there. So even at 40 yards, still good enough for them. Kind of 6 right through the chest and 3 down low. I'd say that'd be a little bit unfortunate if you had any kind of two-legged creature and this was your pattern, having 6 right up top and 3 that are pretty low like that. And now again, over here to our 3-inch 12 pellet load, all 12 pellets right through center mass there. So that is impressive for 40 yards in a double-aught shell for sure. That's the obvious winner for us today is the 3-inch 12 pellet load. You could do just about anything you wanted to as far as buckshot is concerned with that combination. Of course, either one of these would work in an up-close scenario if you wanted to use them in a defensive application. But as far as hunting goes, this is where it really shines, it seems, from this particular combination of gun and choke is this 3-inch 12 pellet option. And here are your two flight control wads out of those shells. The 2 3/4 9 pellet on the left, the 3-inch 12 pellet on the right. Slight difference between them in color, probably just manufacturing differences really, but they are a little different in length as well. If I line kind of the tail skirts up, you can see the 3-inch wad is a little longer. Now both of these look pretty typical, except our 9 pellet 2 3/4 load definitely had one of the pedals snag on something. Could have potentially happened when the wad hit the ground, could have potentially happened when it was going through the choke or something of that nature, but that could have been a reason why we saw the top and bottom split in that pattern. Overall though, the rest of the wads actually look just fine, so nothing I'm concerned with here other than potentially this little flap on the side. All right, y'all. Well, what do you think about these results right here? Definitely a pretty interesting test. Not only running a flight control load through that 835 with that Black Mamba choke to see what it could do as just a combination there, but it's also pretty interesting to see the 9 and 12 pellet loads put side by side. Obviously, the 12 pellet load is our winner over there today, and I think the 9 pellet load tried. We had a nice group of 6 going on that is pretty close to on average what we saw over here as well. And then we threw these 3 down low. Was that a little bit of inconsistency with that one pedal on the side of the wad or something? Maybe. And if we took several more shots, I bet we could probably get a pretty nice even spread. But if it's showing a little inconsistency like that, it would definitely be something I'd want to test more before I just take it out and hunt with it. And of course, that could absolutely go for the 12 pellet load as well. Test a couple more of them, make sure that this kind of split doesn't happen also with the 12 pellet through that combination. But as far as these two shots go, we've got a clear winner over here, and that's a very, very nice, perfectly usable buckshot pattern for pretty much anything you'd want. I wouldn't hesitate to run that combo as long as the shells stay consistent and don't get some sort of a weird split in the pattern. But that just goes to show you can absolutely run a flight control wad through a much tighter choke than what you probably think, because a 690 and an 835 is essentially like having something around the 675 to 680 range in a typical 12 gauge bore as far as choke constriction relative to bore diameter goes. So don't be afraid to try flight control through tighter chokes, because you may be surprised. But let me know all your thoughts down below. Is that about what you expected to see? Were you a little surprised one way or the other? Have you tested any of these flight control loads, whether it be the 2 3/4 9 or 3-inch 12 pellet options? If so, what kind of results have you seen? Are either one of these a combo you would actually hunt with? Or if you're running flight control, is it going to be in a more defensive oriented application? And what other combos might you want to see when it comes to either running these two shells through something else or other buckshot loads through our gun and choke we had today? Let me know all that down below. But with that being said, I've got some more testing to get done for you guys, so I'm going to get back to it. As always, we have the channel Instagram as well as the mailbox where you can send stuff if you'd like. All the information will be in the description if you're interested in it. But I'm going to get back to it, so I'll see y'all in the next one.